Hello, everyone. My name is Lucio Constantine, and welcome to the show. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to sit back and watch a video about Carl Jung, a writer people don't often read unless in lines of Jordan Peterson and Slavoj Zizek. Jung was a Swiss born in 1875 and a student and pupil of Sigmund Freud. There is a chapter in the book specifically about the differences between Freud and Jung, which were that Freud was more atheistic, especially in his book, The Future of an Illusion, which I read, which in my youth I did agree with more so than now. However, Freud saw the whole encompasses of neurosis as infantile nature or sexual libido or anything to do with the problems of sexual development in the individual or the collective psyche. Jung saw neurosis as psychic disturbances. He talks about mandalas, which is a sort of drawings or representations of archetypal images throughout the ages. He talks about how there is a collective unconscious, which is a stream of images that perturb the collective psyche all into one psyche, or images that are featured and present throughout all ages, such as flood myths in early ancient archaeology, or his, or certain mythological figures like Horus and Jesus sharing similar characteristics. Notions such as these were made apparent by the Zeitgeist movies, which were a set of conspiracy theory movies and diatribes about psychology, politics, philosophy, consumerism, and mythology and archaeology. Whether they are true is debated. Further insight can be drawn into Milo and another archaeological channel that I will link in the description. Enough tangents aside, the difference between Freud and Jung was more spiritual, and he saw religion and the spirit of man as something that is good and vital towards the essence of life, where Jung saw the spirit and essence of man as corruptible and a disease among itself. Jung analyzes dreams, particularly of a young woman, 7 or 17 years old, who dreams of her mother hanging from a chandelier while a horse ravages through the house and destroys the house. The horse in Greek mythology represents death, especially if the horse is black or dark colored. Another patient had a dream about a father driving a car into a wall, and Young saw this young man having this dream of a father driving a car into a wall, as his son embodying the images of his father too perfectly, or idolizing the perception and phenomena of the father in his essence. Another patient had a dream of another patient had a dream of striving too far away from his hometown and forgetting where he came from, and he dreamed about his people where he came from, stating he does not visit often, which resembles how he strayed too far from where he came from. Jung analyzes archaic man and symbolizes something archaic as primordial or original. He analyzes Pueblo Indians and uses terms and phrenology such as mana, mana, which designate supernatural or mystical origins Archaic means premortal and or pre premortal and old. He states that archaic man knows that which he does, and man knows what he does. So man needs a reason to do something, and archaic man does it because it has been done throughout the centuries. He also describes the psychological types such as extroversion and introversion and how there are archetypical forms within themselves. He discusses what neurosis is, which is a symptom of psychic disturbances within the psyche. He asks questions like he asks questions like is the mind in relation to God? Is the mind found in contents of God? Is the psyche come before the physical matter of substance? What is matter? What does it mean when the dream no longer embody a spirit or something? And this is in relation to Freud's description of dream as wish fulfillment. Freud saw dreams as fulfillments of a wish, and Jung asked if a dream no longer embodies something, then what does it no longer embody? And he also states, is something beautiful because we attribute beauty to it, or is it beautiful in relation to the subject? For example, he describes the beauty of the sun and how the sun's rays illuminate the earth and sky, and whether the sun is beautiful or whether we attribute beauty to the sun. Jung saw problems of memory as symptoms of neurosis, so forgetting names, dates, facts, and events are symptoms of neurosis. So if you forget something about a test, or if you frequently forget names and dates after being repeated to you, then it's most likely a sign of neurosis or a development of one. In the last two chapters, The Spiritual Problem of Modern Man, Jung states that man is not in fact modern, that man is anything but modern and only claims himself to be as such. For example, we hold truths and activities or futures of ourselves that are seen as modern technology, electricity, thanks to Nikola Tesla, and the wheel and artillery power as something that is modern. However, we act we act arbitrarily and cruel to each other and destructive to nature as a whole. While archaic man did contribute to the rise of cannibalism, the archaic man was more docile to compared to modern man in Jung's view. This is something that you see in the lines of Graham Hancock, who features on Joe Rogan and a few other alternative archaeology sites, and Jordan Peterson as well. For those who are uninitiated, I was a firm believer in Peterson. I read his books. I read 12 Rules for Life, Beyond Order, and I'm reading We Who Wrestle with God. However, Alex O'Connor from Cosmic Skeptic and Keegan from the Nietzsche podcast has shown me the error of my ways, and I'm not that much into Peterson or Jung as I used to be. The collective unconscious is images that perturb the collective sphere of man and Western man as a whole. He describes the differences in the early parts between Adler psychology and Freudian psychology. Freudian psychology was the teacher of bad psychologists to Jung, whereas Adler was a teacher of was a teacher of clergymen and preachers. Jung, in the final parts, the psychologist of the clergy, states states that it is understandable for the psychologist to play the role as a clergy, but there are certain questions which science cannot answer, such as how to find meaning in one's life and how to be happy. The goal of the psychologist, according to Jung, is to provide meaning and happiness to the individual or the patient themselves. And if the psychologist cannot do this, then they should be sent to the clergy. Jung describes in the final parts a patient who describes his neurosis and problems all too well, all too human, all too humanly well, and doesn't understand why he is still sick, even though his mistress pays for his vacations. Jung saw as his inability to provide for himself as a reason for his ailments, and he says that does not understanding a disease does not cure the disease itself. This is a trap I fall into myself with my own disorder, which is a bit of a letdown, quite frankly. Around the third quarter of the book, before the psychologist of the clergy is and in the problem of modern man, he says we are reaping we are reaping the fruits of 19th century education. Religion teaches us blind faith, while while education teaches rational individualism. Rational individualism. This is done to seek meaning and purpose of life, even where meaning or purpose is nowhere to be found. The goal of psychotherapy and psychoanalysis is to provide the patient with with meaning and purpose. There is some forms of answers to Jung's statements that science cannot answer moral questions, which is something that Sam Harris addresses in the moral landscape, which Alex O'Connor talked about in Rationality Rules in the discussion link below, where Viktor Frankl of logotherapy has provided such answers, which is which is questionably or suspiciously debatable. As a bit of a background, I was more right leaning in the start of my academic career. However, as I became more in a university and with peers, I became more central and less religious. This is a common feature of all individuals and is part of the collective psyche, which Jung talks about. I used to believe in Peterson, but not so much any longer, and Graham Hancock, but not any longer. While there are no evidence for what Jung says, despite textual evidence from different religions surrounding flood myths and mythological representations of the spirit, Carl Sagan said, extraordinary evidence requires extraordinary claims. Here, Jung also states that being is a field of force. If you're interested in psychology or religion or philosophy or or tribal studies or primitive cultures in anthropology, then this book is a book for you. Thank you for sticking around and watching this terse and laborious video. Maybe it's not laborious if you don't think so. But I appreciate every one of you. I love each and every one of you. And I wish you safe travels and a meaning and plentiful life as stated by Genesis. Thank you and have a good day. Signing off.
There's this idea in Jungian psychology called the circumambulation. And Jung had this idea that you had a potential future self, which would be in potential everything that you could be. And that it manifests itself moment to moment in your present life by making you interested in things. And the things that you're interested in are the things that would guide you along the path that would lead you to maximal development. Now, it sounds like a metaphysical idea or a mystical idea even, but it's not. It's not. It's a really profoundly biological idea. The idea is something like, well, you're set up so that you're automatically interested in those things that would fully expand you as a well-adapted creature. Well, like, there's nothing radical about that idea.